Today, my guest is James Crook, who is the man, the myth, and the legend, and also happens to be my husband and business partner. And I'm super excited to be able to have James on our podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Leash. It seems a little bit weird being on this side of the microphone, being interviewed for something like this. It's also something where I think it's a bit strange, honestly, being in the same room, facing this way, having this kind of conversation. Usually when we're doing podcasts, we're on either side of a Zoom or we might be facing each other across a table, that kind of thing. But I'm going to do my best.
I love it. And I love the fact that actually the podcast has always been your baby. And here I am with my own crazy idea, completely supported by you. And I'm actually, I said to you, would you like to come on as my guest? And you were like, yes, absolutely. Yes, please. So I would like the audience to know that handsome hubby booked in for this interview. And so I'm excited to
that's how the vulnerability starts.
That's right, exactly, right there.
Sharing the name that I put in the booking calendar.
James has a very good sense of who he is. I love it. This is fantastic. Okay, so for those that don't know you as well as I do, would you like to share a little bit of your background of what you do and your sort of business background and professional career sort of pathway?
Yeah. Okay. So, right now I'm a business coach for massage therapists. So I work in Massage Champions with Leash, with you. We do a lot of coaching in Australia and all over the world, actually, helping massage therapists and other health professionals to just do better with the business side of things. I guess I have kind of felt like this has been the perfect place for me to end up, or for now anyway, to end up based on what I've done in the past. I spent around 14 or 15 years running a digital marketing agency. That really was at a very transitional time in digital life. We started off, it was like websites all the way. Facebook wasn't even invented yet when I first started. Social media was email, basically. And then, we've gone through a whole change of lifestyle in the way that we deal with digital stuff. And that was pretty amazing to be part of. And at the same time, I was, partnered with you, Leash, running the massage clinic. I didn't really have that much to do with it, to be honest. I did build the website and I helped with bits and pieces here and there. And we used to talk about it quite a lot. But we definitely had very separate ideas, very separate businesses. And then at some point, I had, a big change in my direction, a big sort of journey change. And I decided to come and join you in the coaching business. And at that point, it was still fairly new. Leash, you'd transitioned yourself from doing so much hands-on to doing a bit more of the sort of business coaching side of things. And I had been helping a little bit with that. And then I'm like, yeah, let's jump in and do more of this. And it's been, 5 or 6 years now. I've really enjoyed it. It's definitely been the most fulfilling and exciting business that I've ever run or been part of. The growth has been fun. The people are great. It's a super cool industry to be part of. Yeah.
I love that. Well, do you maybe want to share a little bit about your transition of how you went from a technician in terms of marketing and, clarity and marketing's engine room of growth. And you wrote a book called Digitally Enhanced and, all that sort of very kind of technical stuff. What was the catalyst for you to then step out of that, to sell that business and want to come and work in Massage Champions?
Yeah, great story. It's a really good thing to be able to share about. And it's something I have shared before, but very specifically, I did like my business. I had started the same way a lot of people do. I'd started because I was good with the skills rather than good at business. And way back in the day, that was like essentially web design and that sort of thing when I first started. And then grew into broader and more kind of sophisticated marketing as time went on. But although I loved the business, I loved the tech, I loved the creativity, I sort of felt that I didn't really get to connect with people very much. I had kind of a small team. It wasn't a huge team, but I had a team of people that did a lot of the design work and the creative work. And I did a lot of the kind of sales and connection with clients. And that was great. But it's sort of like, even when you do a really good job for a corporate business, they pay the bill, they say thank you in an email and stuff, but it's not really like, it's just a cog in a bigger machine. And I went on this journey over to Indonesia. This was the real catalyst. I went on a journey to Indonesia to visit one of our sponsor kids. We had just a couple of sponsor kids at that time. Personally, went over to visit Anggreni, one of our little sponsor kids in remote Indo. And on that journey, I spent 10 days completely remote, really poor places, It was a great journey. I was with a few other people as well, visiting their sponsor kids too. Really, really impacting. And what impacted me the most was seeing the people who ran the project and the people there. A lot of them were volunteers. They were leading like young kids and helping them out, and the families very integrated into the communities. And I just sort of felt like, wow, they're making such a big difference. And they're so like connected with everything that's going on in the world. There's just so many people kind of all working together and really loving each other through these difficult challenges, right? And I came back, loved the journey, came back to a job that I liked, but I just remember sort of sitting down at my desk. It's this office, it's all very officey. Looking at my computer, there's like 200 or 300 emails to get through because I've been away for like 10 days or something. And I was just like, oh my goodness, I've got to do something different. I don't want to just be connected through technology, through email and that kind of stuff. I want to do something that's more heart-centered. That's what I was using as the words at that time. And so that just kind of sat with me for a little while. It wasn't something that I straight away knew exactly what that meant. But, it didn't even take that long. It would have been only a few weeks later that I was like, Leash, I really just feel like I want to step out of that business, out of the design agency, and come and join you in this new thing, this new coaching. And it didn't even take that long for me to sell it because I was kind of ready to move. I didn't wait for a high price or whatever. I just was like, here's someone who's willing to step in, let's go. And it moved very quickly, but it was scary and excellent at the same time. It was really fun.
As is life, really.
Yeah, well, it's true. And look, the little end part to that story is, as I was moving, I also did still have a really big passion to actually help in Indonesia. One of the things that I said when I first got back was, let's just sell everything and move to Indo. And Leash, you were like, yeah, nah, that's not going to happen. And I don't think I was really serious with that, but that was kind of the rumbling that was there. And so as we created this new business and I came on board with that, what we were able to do was link some of the business activities to more sponsorship. So as we have people come through our major programs, we sponsor kids on behalf of them. So we pay for them and everything, but we kind of just link it to how many clients we've got in the program. And so at the moment, we've got like over 60 or over 65.
63 children, which is 5 children we personally sponsor. And then the rest are all through the business for... Yeah.
And it keeps growing. Like that was years ago. We started with a handful and now it's just growing more and more. And we sponsor them permanently. Every month they're there getting paid for. Yeah. And I just think that's absolutely amazing. I love that. So yeah, really cool.
I love how you share about being connected. And I do think that particularly bodywork therapists are very much driven by connection. A lot of people will talk about the mind-body connection. A lot of people talk about how the general public often doesn't connect to their bodies. And also your ability to connect what it is you do through that digital lens, to be able to connect the heartbeat of what people do in the treatment room to a digital platform like Facebook or Instagram or a website and things like that. And you actually, what I watch you do, and partly because I kind of know a bit behind the scenes, I love watching the aha moments that practitioners have when you gently and methodically and carefully and safely guide them into technologically advanced platforms. What's that process like for you? Like if you're guiding a therapist through who's like, I don't do tech, Facebook's a piece of poo, where's the any key? And you see them build a website or you see you launch their first ad. What's that like for you, sort of from that lens of connection?
Oh, yeah, look, it's pretty exciting and fulfilling, to be honest. It makes me feel good when I see these people seeing success. And I guess it is something where the tech side of it is one thing, but really what they're doing is overcoming those kind of confidence barriers within themselves. And so they build a website or they create a Facebook ad and get some bookings from it. It's not just literally, I got 2 bookings from an ad. It's like, I've got confidence. I've done something I've never done before. And oh my goodness, this can actually work. And that level of excitement coming through from people is really amazing. Yeah. That's what I like.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so you've been involved in around 3 businesses that you've run yourself over your career. Mm-hmm. Tell us about some of maybe the more sort of chaotic times or stressful times and how you found creative ways out of the chaos.
Okay, so there's a few stories. Like, I guess really what you are asking in that question is for stories where the chaos hasn't been good, right? Because sometimes chaos can be creative and can lead to huge opportunities. but there's definitely been times where the chaos has been very challenging, or where it hasn't even been particularly chaotic, but it's just been a very challenging time where I haven't made the best decisions or found myself in awkward spots. I definitely, looking back at my business journey, think that I was incredibly immature when I studied my business in a business sense. I really just started my original business as a sole trader, doing the do, very much just working as a practitioner in my craft, and selling my services for that. And it was because the opportunity was there. I was building websites back then, was mainly building websites, the creative and tech coming together into that. And it wasn't something that was particularly common, especially locally. And there were no things like your WordPress or your Wix or Squarespace, or whatever, where people could go build their own websites. None of that existed. So you had to have a designer or a developer build a website for you. And not every business had a website yet. It was like still kind of the early days. So I guess I stepped in because the opportunity was there, but I really had no idea what I was doing with the business side of things. And over time, I remember there was a point where it's like, we were settling down as a couple. We want to, we've got to have a bit more stability of income here, but think about having kids, think about the future, all that kind of stuff. And it's like, I've got to start either taking this business more seriously or go get a real job. That's basically the choice. And I didn't even really know what I was doing, but I just decided to run the business. That was really, I guess, the first turning point for me, where I was actually committing into it. I was a bit more committed then, rather than just doing it because it was there. It was fine. But as I grew, I guess, like a lot of people, the challenges were around hiring and knowing how to scale. Like I remember at one point, after I'd hired a few designers and stuff, I just noticed that I was doing a lot of kind of admin work, and the designers were doing all the fun stuff. And I'd kind of worked myself into this position where I now had the worst job in my whole business. And I was like, oh, this is a bit crap. And I thought, oh, well, what I need is someone to be a salesperson and business manager, like someone to kind of come in and do all the admin and the connection with clients, salesy stuff. And I just kind of advertised and hired someone. And it really didn't work out. That person could talk a good talk, but just didn't kind of do what I expected. I didn't really have, I was a bad manager too. I didn't have good direction for them. I didn't really understand exactly what that role meant or was. And that cost quite a bit of money for me to have them on board for nearly a year. And that was just sort of the challenge of growth. It was not easy, but I don't know, it was just part of the kind of learning. Later on, I do remember also being caught up a couple of times. That business was quite different to massage. So in the design industry, sometimes you get big projects, sometimes small. And if you get a big project, you get paid maybe in thirds or quarters across the project. So you might be working for a couple of months without getting paid, and then at the end you get a big check. It's like, that's how it works. And I just remember a project that we were fairly deep with, that we'd done a lot of work for, but it hadn't come time to bill them yet. And just being so low financially in our bank account that I knew I wasn't going to be able to make pays that week, make the pay for our staff. And to me, that was like the worst thing, right? That was, I just felt, I guess, really ashamed and like a failure. And how could I have let this happen? And how did I organize this so badly? And I was thinking about my relationship with the staff, like, what are they going to think? What's going to happen? And what I remember from that was like being really stressed. And like my memories of being on the couch at home, the lounge, curled up in a little ball, sort of facing the back of the lounge, and just not wanting to even watch TV or talk to anyone or anything, just kind of being like curled up in this little self-pity ball and not loving life at all. But I think even at times like that, I've got a kind of a brain that naturally just looks for what solution is there to this. And part of the challenge is that I do beat myself up a bit for not having a solution or not finding a way through. But even that, I remember going to work the next day and just being like, well, who does owe us money? Who's out there who we've already sent an invoice to that hasn't paid us yet? And even though those conversations are really awkward, it's like, well, I'm going to make those phone calls if it means that I can pay my staff this Thursday, right? So it's like, get on the phone, make some phone calls to people who owe us money. A little bit awkward, but the money came in. I remember in that specific one, it's like Wednesday night, I still didn't have enough and I'm stressing out, peaking. And then Thursday morning, there was just a couple of monies that came into the bank account. We were able to make pays and that kind of stuff. That probably happened, I don't know, 2 or 3 times over that business career, so maybe a decade, which I guess isn't that much. Thinking back on it now, that's not really that often, but at the time it's really stressful. Yeah. Is that kind of what you're looking for?
Yeah,
Leash,
absolutely.
those kind of stories?
And I think it's like, the creative way out of the chaos for you is, number one, have a meltdown, curl up in a ball, look at the back of the couch and ignore the world. And I think often in business, we don't talk about that. It's like we talk about, again, how did you solve it? What did you do? And it's like, you know what, the reality is, check your pulse, you're human. And sometimes it is, I call it the blanket fort. I'm taking my bat and my ball, I'm having a glass of milk, and you can bugger off all of his and the horses he rode in on too. And you think even that's such a kid thing to do. When you're sick, where do you lie? You lie on the couch and you snuggle in, and it's like, I can so imagine why you would want to do that, because it's comfortable and it's safe. No one's going to bother you there. And then I love that you don't stay in that moment, that you go, okay, right, logical brain goes back into gear and goes, okay, what can I do? What action can I take? And you're right. It's sometimes having conversations about money can be challenging, but I do think the flip side of that is not being able to pay your staff because you're not willing to have those conversations has to be worse.
Yeah, which one's more painful?
Yeah, definitely like, not paying your staff.
I'll do the less painful thing.
Absolutely. And I mean, obviously you have a legal obligation to pay them, but you have a moral responsibility to take care of them when you've got staff as well. And I think, look, and also knowing that you then change the way that your income was generated as a part of that. Do you want to maybe talk through the difference here? So start of Choc Chip, it was very much, you have a job, there'll be these 3 progress payments, and if it goes longer, then we have to wait for that last big lump sum to come in, to then generating, you shifted the way that you did that.
The business changed a fair bit over time. I don't know how much of that is particularly relevant, but when we first started, the business that I built was what I would call a development agency, really, to start with, which meant we did more of the kind of programming side of things. We built web applications and websites that weren't just stock standard sites. And that was quite good, quite profitable when the work was there, but it was also like there just is less of that kind of work around in the world, right? So we would sort of get big projects and then have a bit of a gap for the next one and have that kind of feast and famine thing going on. And after a little while too, it just became harder to get the small jobs, which was kind of what our bread and butter in between was, because WordPress came along and Wix and Squarespace and stuff. People could build their own sites, which is awesome. But it kind of cut out a lot of those kind of low level, smaller jobs that we would normally have relied on in between the big things. So strategically, I was sort of trying to look at this. I say strategically, looking back on it, again, it was just sort of random ideas. It just seems so unstrategic. But at the time, I felt like I was being strategic, right? And I was looking at it going, regular kind of marketing is where it's at, because you can do regular activities for a business each month and get paid each month. It's kind of like more certain, it's more stable. And so I kind of changed from being a development agency into a marketing agency. And we would do things like partner with businesses more ongoing, create Facebook ads and Google ads and all that kind of stuff, and sort of look at how many leads can we get through for these people and how many sales are they making. We didn't do the sales, but we were kind of integrated into businesses a little bit like that. And that was great. It solved some problems, but came with other challenges and things. But yeah, that was good. It's also funny. It's like looking back and telling these stories, it sounds like I knew what I was doing, but at the time, I was excited about it all, but I didn't know. I was just kind of stepping into things that seemed like a good idea and then seeing if they worked or not, right? And yeah, I still feel like now I would handle things probably a little bit differently, and my progress, I'm sure, would be a whole lot faster, up and down. I would make mistakes faster too now. And I kind of then think, wow, imagine what it's going to be like in another 10 years, looking back at where I am now. And I'm sure I'm doing things now that in 10 years, I'm going to think, gosh, that was immature.
Like, I think you make an excellent point in that we often connect the dots retrospectively. And that's a beautiful quote from Masami Sato from B1G1, who like, I think she articulates such a great thing that often it's so easy to look back and go, oh yeah, that's how those dots connected. And you're right, it makes it sound like there's such a very intentional narrative. And I don't think either of us, up until this business, were particularly intentional with the direction we were going. I think a lot of things happened, and I think we learned to build the plane on the way down, or break stuff quickly and fix it quickly, which I think we still do quite well now. However, I think that, yeah, just being able to share those stories is really important for those that might not be doing everything intentionally yet. Is there any other business challenges or setbacks that you can think of that you want to just sort of talk a bit about today?
So many. I mean, you can ask me about all sorts of stuff, but I guess one of the other things that I had thought about sharing was to do with hiring staff overseas. Because I ran a development agency, it was a little bit different, but we have clients now, massage therapists, who hire marketing assistants or VAs and that sort of stuff from overseas. And so when I did that, that must be going back like a lot of years now, probably 10 years since the first people that I was hiring that way. And I just remember at the time thinking, this is really weird, hiring someone that you've never even met and all that kind of stuff. Now, I mean, half the world runs on Zoom, right? Even if they're overseas or in Australia, we're much more familiar with that. But what I remember, I think, was for me, hiring, I naturally, my personality is I have a very positive view of everything. Just I naturally think things are going to work out. Now, in general, I don't think that's a problem in business, right? It kind of gives me a natural kind of ability to take action. But what I remember was when hiring, I would hear people talking about what they can do and what the role is and how it fits. And if there were things that didn't quite fit, I would just kind of naturally assume that people would get better at that stuff, right? That, oh, well, it doesn't matter that they cannot do those things because they can do these ones and we'll just figure that other stuff out. And that really is not the best way to hire. That was my main kind of discovery through that. It's like people in the office, there's a certain level of that you can get over. It's like you can just sort of train people and rub shoulders and kind of they'll learn a bit. Still probably want to make sure people are quite a good fit, but they don't have to have every skill. But if it's someone that you're relying on externally, I just found that I made quite a few hires and had to get rid of people, unfortunately, that just sort of didn't fit in or didn't pull their weight in the role or just literally couldn't skill up into what it was that we wanted. And I think I found that the natural kind of connection you have in person makes up for a bit of that. But if they're online, it just can't. You can't sort of make up that as easily. So yeah, I went through quite a few kind of programmers and designers as well as assistants and things overseas before finding the people that we've got now, which are great, by the way. Yeah, but there's a bit of learning in that.
And what about Sites Made Simple? That's that was a project that I think there's probably the rest of the questions that I've got probably relate very well to some of the stuff that came up for both of us around that time, because it wasn't just your business that was in Australia, but we're interviewing you today. So you can share. But yeah, do you want to share a bit about the idea behind it and some of the setbacks that you faced and perhaps a little bit of trauma that you experienced around the outworking of that project as well?
Yeah, sure. So this is something where at this stage in my business, we'd done a couple of big projects and had some money in the bank. And I'm like, oh, this was again, going back many years now. It was at a point where we were starting to see things like WordPress and Wix and Squarespace on the scene, but they weren't really that common yet. WordPress had been around for a long time, but it wasn't really that user-friendly yet. And we had this idea, or I had this idea of like, well, why don't I just make one of these things where people can create their own website? Then instead of competing with them, I'll just like run one. Like, wow, this is an awesome idea. And I do think that was actually quite a good idea at the time. Like that makes sense. But what I found was the time it took to develop something like that was just far over and above what I had imagined. And so I had quite a good development team working with me then, just a couple of guys that were really good, that I said, hey, we're going to spend a percentage of our time each week developing this thing. They're getting paid for it. But it ended up just taking a really, really long time. And at the end of that process, we had a very simple kind of interactive thing. It was nice and everything, but I hadn't really thought about how am I going to market and sell this? Like, what's the what's the audience? Like I hadn't kind of done the due diligence from that end of things, or didn't have things prepared, I should say, to be able to market and sell it. So it just completely flopped. We never got anywhere with it. It wasn't like a huge deal. It was just looking back on it, a waste of the time and money. If that's one of those wisdom things, it's like if now I was looking at that and thinking, you know, I've got this much in the bank and I'm going to spend 6 months developing something, what would I develop? It wouldn't be that. It would be something different. I guess the challenging part of it is that it came at a time where Leisha's business, so in the context of that, like my wife's income, my wife's business was tanking a little bit. It had its own challenges at that point. I also, in my main business, just wasn't seeing some of those bigger projects come through at that time. So we were kind of relying on the smaller stuff. And I'd been spending not half, but a percentage of our time like doing this other project that hadn't got anywhere. So we kind of just entered a time of like, oh, hang on. Oh, we don't have the income that we normally have. In fact, we've got like next to nothing as profit overall. And it just used up a whole bunch of our savings and caused a lot of stress and that kind of thing.
At the same time, we bought a house and our son went to school and our daughter went to kinder.
Right. And so there's always that awkward period where you're still renting, but you're paying off a build of a house. So all of that was kind of piling up on top of each other. It was a stressful period.
It was so it's about an 18-month period. And like we went from, you know, a very comfortable 6-figure income personally to us, basically from what James, mostly from what Chip was generating, with a support from me because I was looking after the kids most of the time, to a very like maybe a quarter of that, and trying to do all of that other stuff as well. I remember looking back at our finances going, that's why it's been so damn hard for the last little while. And it was crazy, absolutely crazy. You know, I think we both spent quite a bit of time on the back of the couch, you know, curling into a ball around that time. So look, James, what for you when you're in struggle, particularly business struggle, are there any agreements that you make with yourself while you're going through it, either in any of the challenges or circumstances that you've shared, or even, I mean, we might do a separate one that sort of talks about us in business, because we do definitely have some challenges. I mean, we're married, we live in the same house, we work in the same business. There's certainly some challenges, but I think that might be a whole separate episode. For you, when you're going through your struggly bits and through the fight or in the wrestle, what are some agreements that you might make with yourself?
Not sure what you mean by the word agreements. What's that? So
one of the agreements I heard when you were saying about the staff not being able to pay them was that you're really good at learning stuff and that you would just have to take action and find a way. So your agreement with yourself was, I will find a way, even if it's hard. I'll pick up the phone and have conversations about money, even if that's a stretch for me, because my relationship with my staff is more important than the uncomfortability of those conversations. And I know for us, when we were going through that challenging time in that fun year of insanity, one of the agreements we had was that we would stick together through the craziness and the insanity of that year. And I think it was probably the closest we ever were. It's like we actually chose, intentionally or not, maybe it's because it's all we had, we actually chose and ended up becoming closer in that year than I think we ever had before in our marriage. Because one of our agreements, whether it was unconscious or conscious, was that we had to do this together. There was no other sort of way for us to get through that.
So I guess, look, when it comes down to it, if by that you mean what do I tell myself about how I'm going to get through things, or what changed within me that made me want to decide what's going to happen next, I definitely feel like immaturity or a bit of naivety worked in my favor in a way. I just still would kind of think that in one way or another it would work out. Now, I do remember that some of the most challenging things that I found is that, for example, I just kind of had an expectation built in without even really being aware of it, that there would be some kind of savior that would come along, something would happen and it would all just be reversed and fixed. And I I remember thinking, oh, isn't that how it works? You go, things just kind of, there's a knight in shining armor effect, there's someone who comes along and just helps. And the people around us were very nice. Like my parents are very supportive emotionally, we're very connected, but they weren't in a position, nor I don't think they would choose to kind of bail someone out of that kind of financial challenge. And a little bit the same with Leisha's parents, like, yeah, lovely people, but not able to actually come and rescue us in that sense. And I remember that being a bit of a shock. It's not that I expected it consciously, but just getting to that level of like, oh, no one is going to rescue us from this. This is like our problem to deal with, and we've got to figure out how to solve this. And in a way, I think that kind of stubbornness or that naivety and immaturity kind of kicks in of like, well, I can solve it. I'm good at lots of stuff. And even that, I remember there being a time in my maybe sort of mid to late 20s where it's like, I'd never really failed big time at anything. We all have failures, but nothing that I never really wanted to do had I ever really like had a huge crashing failure with. I always kind of did well at school, and I didn't do heaps of really, I don't know, challenging things that I failed at. I don't know. And I remember kind of being at that point in my late 20s when business was struggling, just going, oh my goodness, this is me failing. This is me learning how to fail. I have actually just been doing what I thought was the right things, and it's leading to failure. And finding that very, very challenging, not because I didn't think I could do better. If I had known the right things, or I learned something from it, or I'd more consciously made decisions, I'm sure I could have solved it. Like I still have that belief about myself, but just going that kind of breaking feeling inside of like, oh crap, this is failing. This is not going to work unless I massively change something. And I think for me, I have the kind of ability to just, or a feeling of like, it's almost like trampling through a muddy field. It's like, it's hard to make this move. It's difficult to lift my foot out and put it forward. But I just kind of know that if I just keep going, eventually I'll get to the other side, and then the mud won't be there anymore. And it will be easier at some point. So it's almost like I feel myself shrinking in. It's like, oh my goodness, so there's no other options anymore. I've got to just kind of look quite close, keep the vision small, but keep moving even those small bits to just kind of get out the other side. Yeah, I don't really know if it's that resourceful. Like looking at where I am right now, it's one of those things I would probably give myself different advice. But I think that's probably what gave me the internal fortitude or strength to be able to move through it. For example, I remember turning up at work at some of those difficult times, and like after the drive-in, I would park the car right at the front of my office. I could see the front door in my car. And sometimes I'd just sit there for a minute or two thinking, and I'd like take a few deep breaths. Okay. And now I'm ready to go in and face whatever challenges are there and answer all the emails and the onslaught of chaos that happens in that kind of busy environment. And I knew that I wasn't going to enjoy it, but I could just kind of do the couple of breaths and then do it anyway, and just kind of keep doing it, knowing that it's not forever. It's just to get through this bit. Yeah, is that an agreement?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know.
That'll work. That's perfect. So knowing what you know now, then, if you had the opportunity to sit as a passenger in that car at that time, knowing what you know now, what would you share with yourself? What would you either do differently, or what would you say to yourself back then?
I would say there's a couple of things. The first one is to just tread more lightly with everything, or take things more lightly. Don't be so serious about losing some money or whatever. It's like money goes up, money goes down. If you treat it a bit more lightly, it's easier to get through that muddy patch, right? You can just move more quickly. So I think part of that is just mindset and probably practice. Like having gone through those things, I can just see that I have made it through. And I don't mean like now we're bathing in dollar bills and all that kind of stuff, but I just mean it's nowhere near as hard as that anymore. There's difficult periods and there's easy periods, and they're all just kind of going to keep moving through. I also think I would counsel myself to do things faster. In a difficult spot like that, I would probably tell myself, find someone who's going to lend you some money. Like I could have gone to my parents and just asked them straight out, can I have a loan for 20 grand or whatever? I don't know if they would have given it to me or not, but I'm sure if I was more proactive, I could have found a way to get a loan, or do something else to kind of solve those immediate problems and allow me to move past them faster and get back into positive territory and then pay off a loan much more quickly or whatever is needed. But I guess, yeah, to just take more action and even more kind of random action, because just, I reckon now what I know is just doing anything is better than kind of doing nothing, or even doing things slowly. Doing more things faster is always going to get a bigger and better result.
Yeah. Yeah. So who did you get to become as a result of all of that?
That's an interesting question. The changes in me, I definitely feel more mature, as I've mentioned a couple of times. I feel like just having had those experiences helps me to get through the same or future experiences much more easily. Because this is true for all of us, right? There's something in my brain that just says, oh, well, we got through that hard time once before, not that it's easy now, but it's just lighter, it's easier because I've seen it happen a few times before and it's worked out. I'm still here, I'm still going okay. So that's definitely something, just kind of that immaturity and strength to keep moving through things. In a broader sense, I think it is also something that I've been able to bring to my current role. It is one of those retrospective dots where it's like going through those challenges. Now, if someone else is going through a challenge like that, I have a much greater ability not to freak out with them. People say all sorts of things, especially the last couple of years when business has been very challenging for a lot of health professionals and just every other damn person, right? There's been a lot of challenges. It hasn't always been easy for us either, but my main strength in that has been able to just kind of bring a level of calmness and perspective to people. I feel it's kind of, it's challenging. Yeah. So what? We're going to get through this just like every other time. Is kind of built into me, and I'm allowed to kind of then share that perspective with other people a little bit more.
Yeah, beautiful. So what is the greatest impact you've had on the world because of the challenges that you faced?
I wish there was like some specific thing where I could say, look at this one big thing that I've done. And maybe one day there will be, who knows? But I think for now, it really is the business that I'm part of now, coaching and training massage therapists. I really do see having a much more impacting and pivotal role in people's lives, in their actual personal, emotional, and financial lives. My old job was great and we did some really good work and creative and technical. But what we do now is we have people who literally come to us and they're like, I have these struggles, I have this self-doubt, I have this business that doesn't work properly. And at the end of it, those things are changed around. And maybe they're not perfect yet, but they've made that turning point. Their life is on a different trajectory. And it makes me really happy and proud to be part of that. And it might not be millions of people or even thousands of people, but it's just kind of like even a handful of people, when you get to work with them in a way that makes a huge difference in their life, it's really gratifying. It's really, encouraging and fulfilling.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. James, thank you so much for sharing with us today. And as we said, this is a little bit more of a kind of the deeper side of James, the kind of more challenging things that we don't often get the opportunity to talk about. So I really appreciate not only your time, but your willingness to go deeper with us today. And for those that are listening, to better get a different insight into who you are behind the scenes and your story that's created you into who you are today.
It's a pleasure. I can't wait for the next one.